Welcome students. Um, in this class I will continue with the lesson that I was engaging with you since the last few classes, and that is finding out the other of Kim. So up till now we had learned about the author's own ambivalence. So why did we study that? There is a purpose behind studying the ambivalence of the narrator or the author. The author, that is Kipling. So we studied the ambivalence of Kipling, why and how it exists and what are its connotations, and how that same ambivalence is transferred on to the narrators of Kipling, and what that signifies. Why is that important? How does the text that we have in front of us right now, how does this ambivalence and this transference of ambivalence to the narrators, the split existence of Kipling's own consciousness, how does that shape the text? So keeping that aside, we understand and we know that the post-colonialism, the theory of post-colonialism, the theory of colonialism, that of Orientalism, all of these, they are primarily founded upon the critical study of representations. How are the people or characters within a text represented? So we study the characters, or we study elements of the text not for what they really are, but for what they symbolize, what they stand for. And hence in this particular class, and also in the next class, we will study about various symbols, the symbolism within the text of Kim, and how they work towards, or how the symbols are reinforced with various narratives of the other. Now, narratives of the other, when I say that, you need to remember all of our previous lessons where we had come to the conclusion, where we had come to the conjoined conclusion, a conclusion out of conjunction, that the other is also Kipling. How Rudyard Kipling can also be otherized, or how he himself has otherized his own self while trying to otherize the natives, while trying to otherize India, or to otherize the colonized. And we had studied about that. We had provided certain rationale behind his way of thinking, and we had gone through certain relevant examples and relevant authentic sources from his own autobiography, and we can safely conclude that Kipling's own ambivalence resulted or existed because of a constant and a consistent conflict between his own English self and the Indian self, the both of these selves that were within him, thereby creating a very marked split within his own consciousness and character. The ambivalence which would later on, or which would precisely be transferred on to his narrators and also to his characters, which Kim is a part of. So let's begin. So here throughout this class, you will see that I will have referred to various portions of the text, various specific portions of the text, and in order to facilitate your understanding, I have tried to provide the exact position of those quotes within the text, and it would be helpful if you note them down, so that this also means that later on you cannot come and ask me for suggestions of important chapters, because you need to understand that the paragraphs or the sentences or the conversations that I'm quoting here within the classes, during the classes, they are themselves the important ones. So yes, of course, then that puts us into a very textual context, and today's class will be very much interlinked with the text itself. So the major problems and contradictions in the novel They are informed and shaped by Kipling's divided sense of self, its multiple loyalties to the power of empire during a time of intensified authority, as that time was, as we had discussed in the previous classes, how after post Sepoy mutiny or post 1857, how the Raj or how the British rule it intensified its control over the colonized. So yes, as I was saying, during a time of intensified authority, and Kipling's love for a lost India that blurred the distinctions, that essentially blurred the distinctions between the ruler and the ruled. So on one hand, there is the inner quest, which is the search for an identity. The inner quest is the search for an identity, which suggests this search for an identity, it suggests the possibility of self-discovery and integration of his many selves. So Kim, who is also divided between being an Englishman and being an Indian, being a native, he is symbolically in a quest, two quests particularly. The first one is a search for an identity, which we know is the first thing that is required in order for us to decolonize the mind. That is, we need to search for our own identity, and that is the first and foremost quest that Kim unwittingly undertakes throughout the novel. And this search for an identity suggests the possibility of self-discovery and an integration, a conglomeration, a unification of his many selves. The arrival at an identity mediated by the Lama, whom Kim learns to love. But this search, again, it collides with his outer quest, which is the journey and the insistent pursuit for definition, in a search for a father who will free him from some of the anxieties and problems involved in such a search. So the second quest is of course a resultant of the first quest, as I was talking about in the last classes of the anxiety that Kipling himself felt. So see how I am connecting it to the text. So this search, the first search, it collides with the outer quest, which is the journey and the insistent pursuit for definition in search of a father who will free him from all of these anxieties and problems involved in such a search. Kim's love for the Lama and his search for identity, in other words, are consistently mediated by ruling structures of power. As we know how power targets the formation of identity and falsifies it according to its own wishes, according to its own profit-making interests. So Kim's love for the Lama and his search for identity are consistently mediated by ruling structures of power and finally come under the control of the colonial system. And so we have this introductory chapter with us, where Kim and his world are introduced through images and events that appear to be very appropriate and subvert established imperial roles, and to suggest through an oppositional discourse, through a discourse of opposites, which we will learn, through an oppositional discourse, possible alternatives to the system. Yes, so we are introduced through images and events, as I said, that appear to be appropriate but are very subversive. They are very subversive as well, subversive to the established imperial roles, and they suggest through an oppositional discourse possible alternatives to this system, to the system of colonial rule. But this subversion is only an apparent one. This subversion is only an apparent one. Our first image, the first image that we are introduced to in the opening sentence, for instance, is of an unnamed apparently native boy, astride the gun Zamzama in violation of city orders. You're not supposed to sit on top of the Zamzama. So Kim violates the orders because he does not he reacts negatively to the authority that exists over him, because he thinks himself to be a white person, and as such he is not entitled he is not entitled to abide by the laws, the rules and regulations that are imposed by his own kinsman if he is an Englishman. And at the same time, he is also treated as a native. He is burned as black, and he is introduced to us as an apparently native boy. So, although this appears to introduce Kim as a rebel, the order of phrasing is very, very significant. How Kipling phrases this sentence. Whereas the first part of the sentence suggests a rejection of authority, the second part complicates that impression by creating a new image of authority, of the boy in control of the gun. The sentence also allows two images to confront and collide against each other. As you can see in front of your screen, the gun and the Lahore Museum, they are in collision with each other. They are the oppositional discourses that I just spoke about. The gun and the Lahore Museum, and where each is an emblem for a complex historical, cultural and political situation. The gun, where the Zamzama, it is the emblem of British authority. As it is written in the book, who hold the Zamzama, that fire-breathing dragon, hold the Punjab. The first chapter also tells us this. So the gun is the emblem of British authority. It is geographically and symbolically opposed to what? The Wonder House, which is nothing other than India. The Wonder House is India. The curious but historically necessary opposition between these two, it leads Kipling to reduce the threat of the first, that is the threat of the gun, the threat of the British imperial power, the emblem of British authority. So by presenting to us both of these images in the introductory chapter, what Kipling does is he reduces the threat of the first image, that is the gun or the Zamzama. How does he reduce it? He reduces the threat by perceiving it through, by making this image being perceived through the eyes of a boy, perceiving it through childlike eyes, to whom this gun, the Zamzama, the emblem of British authority, is nothing but a fire-breathing dragon. And to reduce repeatedly the social and political complexity of India into the exquisite and timeless images, what is done? What here is done? These timeless images, they are displayed in a museum controlled by an English curator. So you see, we are having over here all of these theories in praxis. There is a subversion in the way Kipling introduces the titular character to us. The titular character, with all of its characteristic complications, we are setting aside. The titular character Kim refuses to abide the rules and regulations of the British imperial authority and sits on top of the gun of the Zamzama, which we know is an emblem of British authority, because who hold the Zamzama? Hold the Punjab. And who holds the gun? Whose Zamzama? Whose gun is it? It belongs to the British, and the British have instructed the natives that they are not to fidget with the Zamzama. But Kim does not care, and Kim sits on the Zamzama. So here is a subversion that is presented to us. But Kipling, a part of him being a representative of the British imperial authority, what he does is that he contains this subversion. So we can refer it back to the subversion and containment of new historicism, which we had learned while we were reading excerpts from Invisible Bullets. So how is it contained? It is contained, Kipling contains it by making this Zamzama and making all of the timeless images and cultural artifacts of India being literally contained and therefore controlled by the British curator of the museum. So this is how the subversion is contained. And Kipling does this both. He creates the subvertive event in the novel, and as a empathizer, as someone who empathizes nostalgically with the lost past of India, and at the same time being a representative and a sympathizer of the imperialist project, he contains this subversion by making the owner of the museum of course a British person, and he is in control of all of these cultural political artifacts within the museum, within the wonder house, which is again a symbol, which is again an emblem for India. I hope this is clear. So what is the next symbol that we find? Very important. The next symbol that we have is a symbol that is resonated throughout the novel. I will provide a few examples, few direct examples, but the Red Bull on a green field, this entire imagery is something that as a symbol which dominates the novel, as this is a prophecy, as this is part of a prophecy that Kim was told. So Kim was said that in the very beginning, we will see, we will have, of course we have read the novel, and we know that at the very beginning of the novel, Kim narrates to us, the novel narrates to us of a prophecy that was given to Kim, who will be Kim who is supposed to bring honor, and Kim who is supposed to win or achieve victory when he sees a Red Bull on a green field. So this image, this emblem or this symbol, it resonates tacitly as in it is silent. It is not brought to the forefront like the Zamzama. It is silent, but it is silently vicious, as it undercuts the entire sentiment of the novel, the entire tone, the pitch in which the novel is written. So this emblem, it resonates tacitly throughout the novel and suggests the political theme of the British redcoats. The British used to wear red coats, right? The British redcoats charging through the fertile green field of India. The political splitting repeats itself on other levels as well. The Red Bull is or are the British redcoats. The green field is the green field of the fertile land of India. The other levels at which this symbolism exists is that the Red Bull also symbolizes or also represents the male aggression of the Red Bull, which is opposed to the very female fecundity of the green field. And Kim's split quest, the inner and the outer quest, split quest for definition, not integration of these qualities in his own personality, his manhood in the midst of the confusion of India's green fields. So this image, specifically what it does is that it gives Kim a standing. It gives Kim a definite quest. It directs him primarily to a particular event that would happen, that would eventually occur within the novel. So here we see Kim running for this prophecy to come true, or waiting for this prophecy to come true, not with a desire of integration. That is, he does not want to have the integrated characteristic qualities of male aggression and female fecundity of the Red Bull and and the green field. No, he wants a definition. He wants to fall under any one category. He wants to fall under either under the category of the Red Bull, representing male aggression, representing the British redcoats, representing the British imperialist project, the colonizers, or he wants himself to be like the green field, the fertile fecundity of India, the natives. He wants to be a part of that group in which he has been born and bred. So this quest or this emblem symbolizes Kim's run or Kim's race for a definition, for a definite identity, that what should he call himself? As we saw in the previous slide as well, the question that we had, who is Kim? Who is Kim? He is constantly asked within the novel. So, yes, as I was saying, so his quest for an identity. So, at the very beginning, what we must make clear is that the identity, any sort of identity, is given to us by our father. The father gives us the name of the father. Even religion of Christianity, the religion is also dependent, or one of its pillars is this, that the name of the father. At first there was the word, and the word was of God, of Jesus. So whatever the beginnings were, the genesis of the world was the word of God, which is nothing but the name of God, the name of the Father. And even in the real world, the name of the Father, that gives us an identity. But in this novel, from the very beginning, we know that the father is dead. So we have the author looking for an umbrella under which to cast his own confusions and anxiety. Kipling is looking for a father figure as well, whom to finally abide by, whom to finally reconcile with. Should it be Britain, England, or should it be India? Of course, for Kipling it was England, but here we have a perfect mirror image, or an extension of Kipling's own ambivalent self, and that is of Kim. And Kim is in a quest as well. He is in a quest for identity. But at the very beginning, the plot is set for us. His own father, his biological father, is dead. So now his identity is in the open. It is up to him to make it. But we know that the father is dead. So what happens? So what is the significance of this particular phenomenon, of this particular event of the death of the father? So what if the father is dead? It's very important. It's very, very important that the father is dead. The subsequent narrative, as you can see in front of you, that this story of Kim, it exists against a very simple background of an absent dead father, whose failure makes possible the Indianization of his son and risks the danger of boundary blurring between the colonizer and the colonized. And with this background, the subsequent narrative, or the narrative that follows we follow, the narrative of Kim's growing love for his chosen father figure, the unworldly Lama. It is contradicted by the story of the English Kim, who discovers the absent father desires. The absent father, they represent the desires. Although, of course, this is never admitted within the text. And Kim wants this absent father to replace his chosen father, that is the Lama. And he wants to fulfill the role in which his own biological father had failed, and thereby attain the hierarchical position. He merely mimes or mimics at the novel's opening, which is also the first stage of colonization according to Homi K. Bhabha, as he talks about mimicry of man in a system of colonization, where the first step of otherizing, or becoming the other, of the first step of the native becoming the other, is this, that he mimics the white British officer. And so we have the titular character, the ambivalent Kim. In the first chapter, he merely mimes the authorial position of the British imperial officers, one of whom his father was also supposed to be. And if he would have been alive, Kim would have had that position as a result of inheritance. But he does not have that. Instead, he has the Lama, whom he chooses for his father. Yet, what he wants truly is for these desires of having the ultimate and final control over the natives. The desires which is represented by, of course, by the father who is absent, the father who has died, the father that is the entire invisible system of colonization. Kim wants to be a part of that, and he wants that to replace the father that he has chosen, and that is the Lama. So what he wants is that he wants this absent father, the desires, to replace the Lama, and he wants to fulfill the role in which his father had failed, and thereby attain the hierarchical position he merely mimes at the novel's opening, that he is the paternal controller of all his Indian subjects, the Muslims, the Buddhists, Hindus alike. And therefore, what appears to be a boy's adventure story at the very beginning, boy's adventure story, it appears to be, it is also a complex fantasy of idealized imperialism and colonialism. And it is also the friendship between Kim and his Lama. And the friendship between Kim and his Lama is Kipling's fable of the ideal relationship that should exist between the Englishman, which of course Kim is at heart, he is an Englishman at heart, and the Indian. So what Kipling tries to show through this relationship between the father Kim chooses and the father who is absent in his life, the Lama and his desires. The relationship between Kim and the Lama is how Kipling tries to make a fable of the ideal relationship that should exist between an Englishman and an Indian, which should be eternally passive, unworldly, and childlike. Because in reality, there is no better version of this relationship between an Englishman and an Indian. It can never be ideal, it can never be good, it can never be enclosed within comfort zones. And therefore, in a very subtle lobbying scheme, what Kipling does is that he makes the titular character a child, much less an adolescent. And it is through him that we perceive this entire relationship. And therefore, the ideal relationship between an Englishman and an Indian can nothing be but childlike. As the creator of a colonial fable, Kipling confronts the necessary contradictions in colonial identity. These are the necessary contradictions that exist in colonial identity, but then resolves the contradictions by allowing Kim's love for the Lama to blur the reality of his rejection of the Lama's values. So even though Kim loves the Lama, Kim rejects the Lama's values. And these are the necessary contradiction that exists within a colonizer's mind. Kipling loves India, yet rejects the cultural traditional values that India has, permeates with, that India is full of. It's very much like that, like Macaulay's New Indian, Indian in blood, but English in principle, English in wit. Because you cannot change the blood, and the blood over here belongs to the father who is dead, who was an imperial officer. And even though Kim learns or comes to love the country in which he is born, even though he kicks his Muslim and Hindu friends, he calls them friends and he goes around with them, similar groups, same friends. Even though he loves them, it does not give him any alternate way of looking at life. Even though he calls them friends, his ambivalence also puts him in a position so that he can justify him kicking his friends, because he wants to be that eventual paternal controller of all the natives alike. And this is the contradiction, this is the ambivalence that Kipling tries to catch or tries to represent in his own novel. So what you can see in front of you is an entire paragraph that I have quoted, and this is a very important paragraph. The first chapter itself is a very important chapter. That is why there are so many analyses that we can form right out of this very chapter. And so we are told, so I would like you to read this first, and then I will begin my explanation. So I'm going to give you about a few seconds to read, and then I will continue. Okay. So we are told that Kim is English and therefore justified in kicking the Hindu boy off the Tronians, and that though he is burned black as any native and consorts on terms of perfect equality with the small boys of the bazaar, Kim was white. We learn that his father, Kimball O'Hara, a sergeant of the Mavericks, an Irish regiment, fell to drinking and loafing after his wife died of cholera, and that he then fell into the company of a local half-caste woman who led him to opium and eventual death. So as early as the second paragraph, we learn, along with Kim, of course, Kim is also the learner here, something significant about the natives. They are to be controlled and kicked off the Tronians, because if allowed control, their unrestrained ways can lead to the death of fathers. So this is how the very first step of otherizing is created by Kipling. The fact that Kipling mines the actual authority of the imperial officers by sitting on the Zamzama, by disobeying the imperial orders, this mimicry is a result of the fact that he did not have his real father present in front of him. He had an absent father, a father imagined, the imagined reality of Laka, as we were talking about. The father imagined is the white imperial authorial and ideal officer. So the fact that he mimics this authority is a result, is a consequence of the fact that his own real father is dead. His own father is absent, and that absent place is duly filled by the emblem of the Red Bull, by the British Red Coats, by the imperial officers, by the imperial authority, by the colonizing project, the colonizers. And that gives him that mimicry, that this death of the father. This at the very first, at the very earliest, puts Kim in this position of self-split, in this position of ambivalence. And in the very beginning chapter, we learn this very essential characteristic or quality of the natives, that they need to be controlled, otherwise it will lead to death of fathers, and then it will lead to mimicry, and then it will lead from the native being a savage, barbarous, unrelatable creature to becoming slowly becoming like the imperial officer, which again may lead to the split within the colonial mind, within the ambivalence of the author, the ambivalence of the British imperial authority. So it should be this mimicry should be nipped in the bud, and that this nipping in the bud can only occur if there is a control of the natives from the very earliest, from when they are nothing but children. So this is an entirely close-knit mesh of political authority, whereby we cannot pull Kim out by the ear from this vicious cycle of mimicry and ambivalence. Mimicry and ambivalence, which is also a text, the name of a text by Homi K. Bhabha. So this half-caste woman within the text, she vanishes from the book almost as soon as she is introduced. Kim apparently never thinks of her, and for her part, she apparently never wonders where he has gone and makes no attempt to contact him. She is the first of the many women in the story, and an important part of Kim's initiation is splitting off women from men. Splitting off women from men. It should remind you of what I was saying in the beginning of this class. The female peasantity, the green fertile fields, the female India. So the idea of India as being your own, upon the fields upon which you walk, that itself is separated from Kim at the very beginning. If we consider India to be a woman, which is of course a common metaphoric association that we make with our motherland, Mother Earth. So land is always a female figure. This of course has other political affiliations. In the patriarchal setup of things, it is easier to control the land if it is a she, so that you can work over it, you can control over it, you can control it, you can manipulate it, you can cut it, split it, sell it, buy it. So the land has to be of course a female entity. It has to be a feminine gender. And if in this novel, coming to the context of the novel, if India is also the green fields over which the Red Bull must run and dominate, then this green field of the female idea, the women of the story, they are separated from Kim at the very beginning, internally as well as externally, assigning them rigid values and building up defenses against them. Although the half-caste woman who raised him tells the missionaries she had been Kim's mother's sister, the narrator takes pains to counter the problem of miscegenation explicitly by reminding us that she is no kin but an other. And since we know that Kim's father was lured into drugs, this is the idea that is presented to us, that the half-caste woman manipulated or tempted Kimball O'Hara, Kim's father, into drugs, into opium, and an eventual death. And since we know that Kim's father was lured into drugs, desertion and death by a half-caste woman, we are alerted to her position in the hierarchy of natives, set up and stereotyped early in the text. So this is another stereotype that we find, the stereotype of the tempting woman, of the woman who is the tempter. So not fixating on that, moving on. The father's legacy to the boy, his clearance certificate, his signature and his birth certificate, these all of these are the father's legacy for Kim. The father's legacy to the boy proves his identity as an Englishman and a Freemason. These details of parentage and of membership in a privileged race and club of the white imperial officers, they all justify and confirm the opening sentences of both the first and the second paragraphs. The image of Kim as an emblem of British authority. The details of parentage also undercut the opposing impression of Kim's defiant rejection of authority. The paragraphs also alternate, like the rest of the book, between confirming and denying Kim's essential whiteness. His identity as an Englishman and his superiority over the natives, by juxtaposing those qualities against his native coloring, his native garb, and his inadequate command of English. So the fact that Kim is confusedly in search of a father figure, that he is undergoing not one quest of chivalry like the medieval romances, but two quests, an inner one and an outer one. He is looking for definition, he is looking for an identity, which eventually comes under the control of the imperial schema of things. All of these oppositional qualities of the titular character, they are presented to the reader, they are presented to us at the very beginning, and so that the ground is set for whatever is to follow. And therefore we shift, or we move between, sift is the word, not shift, we sift ourselves among all of these identities, among all of these quests. Kim's essential whiteness, which is again juxtaposed very contradictorily to the to all of his other qualities, such as his native coloring, his native garb, and his inadequate command of English. The retention of English markers, even within the acquired traits of nativism, the fact that Kim retains certain English markers even when he is completely become a native. He was born black, but he was English, as we are told. This retention, it confirms the assumption that an Englishman's identity is unquestionable and supreme, regardless of his appearance, language, or disguise. A certainty undercut by Kim's later rejection of the English structures of oppression. So as we move through the plot, as we read the novel, we come to the eventual conclusion that Kim rejects the English structures of oppression, because he learns that an Englishman's identity is unquestionable and supreme, regardless of his appearance, language, or disguise, which we can subject to Kim as well. But if we subject this to other imperial officers who maybe do not deserve to be deferred, to be respected, who do not deserve to be in control of the natives, who grow so close, the natives who are in such close relation with Kim, and as Kim realizes that, as he grows, as he Kipling tries to somewhat some semblance of decolonization of mind, Kim with certainty rejects the English structures of oppression. Kim is both the keeper of the gun and little friend of the world which is India. Two roles that are incompatible, mutually exclusive, and capture exactly the inimical, the harmful dilemma of the empire. But the inadequacies and charm of the book arise from the impossible fantasy that the Englishman, if sufficiently deprived and Indianized in his formative years, can find a multitude of native parents who will cherish and indulge him as master, and to whom he can in turn play the twin roles of child and parent, the chela and overlord, equal and king of the castle. There are other symbols and emblems within the novel as well, which reinforce the ambivalence of the titular character, which again add to the ambivalence of the creator of the character, that is Kipling. And the rest of them we will continue in the next class. Thank you very much.